Welcome to Constructing the Future podcast. I'm your host, Rhianna Trapani. Here we celebrate industry leaders shaping the future of the construction industry. They have inspiring stories and insights to share, and we're so excited to bring them to you, the listeners. I'm a director of virtual civil consulting, a remote-first company of experienced project managers, providing you with pre-contract support, expanding your tendering capacity. Leave the planning to us so you can focus on what matters most, delivering the project. Today is super exciting, and we have a multitude of guests online. Graeme, welcome, second episode. He's also director here at BCC. And of course, our guest, we've got Sam Lytle, founder and creator of BeyondWare, Beyond Typicals software, and Brian Sroufe, business development manager. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Can you guys jump in and give us a much better introduction than I did of yourselves and the company, the software?
Yeah, I'd love to. So again, I'm Sam Lytle. I've created BeyondWare, and my background is in transportation and civil engineering. I started my career with Nevada Department of Transportation. I'm from the Las Vegas area. And during my early days as an engineer, I fell in love with 3D visualization. So just showing what a project would look like, because these can be very complex projects. And so I decided early on that I wanted to do this visualization full time. And in 2014, I started Civil FX. We provided visualization services for transportation and civil projects. I did that for 6 years, grew that team to 10 full-time employees. We did all sorts of visualization, mostly transportation and mostly interactive visualization. So we really started using like game engines like Unity and later Unreal Engine to take these big complex system-to-system interchanges or highway widenings and show them to the public. And after 6 years of doing that, I sold that company in 2020 to Parametrics, an engineering firm. And that's when I started BeyondWare with the goal of making better software so that engineers and planners could do their own visualization. And originally I had a very ambitious idea of making a full visualization software application called BeyondCAD. And if anyone's familiar with the architecture industry, there are things like Lumion or Twinmotion that kind of interact with the architectural design tools like Revit or SketchUp. And I wanted to make that for transportation. And that's what BeyondCAD was going to be. So we built it, we launched it, and it never really gained the traction that we had hoped it would. But there was this feature that I always wanted for that, which was a typical section creator. Because at Civil FX, we would have clients come along and ask us for like a 3D section of a road, a typical section, and we would model those and give those to our clients. We wanted this to be a feature of BeyondCAD. Well, as we got further along in development of this feature, I realized it could be its own standalone application. So we split it off and made it Beyond Typicals, because again, typical sections. And for a while, we sold that alongside BeyondCAD. And eventually it became very clear that people were much more excited about this little side application Beyond Typicals than they were about this massive BeyondCAD. And so eventually we discontinued development of BeyondCAD and we focused just on Beyond Typicals. And we started getting that out and getting some really excited early customers. One of those customers was particularly ambitious and bugged me a lot. Just said, man, this is going to change the industry, but you got to kind of like add these features. You got to make it more. My background's like roadway design, and he's like, oh, you need to do more like urban planning, and so that helped the evolution of the product. But it was also just like, man, this guy he really likes his software. You won't stop bugging me. So eventually, I just hired him and said, you just come work for me. You sell the software. You make the software better. And a year ago, I brought Brian along, and it was a wonderful decision. And so with that, I'm going to throw it over to Brian.
Yeah, thanks. You humble me, but I practically begged for a job because I really couldn't stop talking about this software, and I was bothering everyone at my company about it constantly. Essentially, my background kind of started as a transportation engineer, eventually becoming a project manager and really focusing on urban corridor improvements in the Midwest United States. So 14 years in Chicago, at a smaller private firm, about 100 people, and we primarily worked for the city of Chicago, and then more recently moved to Minneapolis and kind of doing the same thing, but just in a different area. But that whole time, over 15 years, using some pretty outdated tools to come up with a roadway corridor design or a set of options, or be able to walk through what that road is going to look like during construction and how that affects everybody that works on that road or drives on that road to work or lives on that road. So we had, tools like StreetMix, if you're familiar with that. It's a free two-dimensional online kind of cartoon road typical section builder. And it has, I had a really strong love-hate relationship with that over the whole career, where it's so fast and easy to use, but so limited in the specificity of what you can build out with it and how you can communicate from it. Eventually, clients just hated seeing it because they had the same frustrations that we did. So when I'm working here in Minneapolis, and looking for some kind of solution to help communicate a specific roadway project I was working on. We were between getting shortlisted on a proposal for a roadway reconfiguration in the southern area of Minneapolis, and basically ready to go into a video interview, kind of like this one, and in that period, after being shortlisted and before going into that interview, I stumbled upon this new software that a buddy of mine told me about. And, pre-public launch, I basically asked Sam for permission to be able to use it because, it wasn't publicly available. And basically in that shortlist interview, pulled the software up, built out like 2 or 3 options showing the county, like, this is what I think this road could look like. It's really constrained. We're going to have to negotiate. There's going to be a lot of trade-offs in some of these areas, but here's what we can look at and deal with, and be able to communicate those design ideas with them and then anybody else that's involved in that project. And we were awarded the project. Basically told us, or the county basically told me that when I did that, they were going to give us the project. They made up their mind right then when I did that. And then they became subscribers to the software eventually as well. So it was just immediate success using Beyond Typicals in its earliest stages. And it's come such a long way since then. Part of that, like Sam said, I just kept bothering him as that customer and saying it needs this feature or something like that. And Sam's team just did an amazing job of just evolving the software. And again, it got to a point where I could not stop telling people about it. And so I just said, hey, Sam, I would love to do this full time. Just talk about Beyond Typicals, because I think our industry could really benefit from this tool, because nothing like this exists. So now I'm here and kind of leading the charge with tutorials and training and helping sell the software, and it's been a great journey.
I think, Brian, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there with I don't think there is another software like this on the market. It really does fall in a niche in terms of, like, I can think of endless times over the years I've just thought about, I need a tool that's not just for a permanent design, but in the space we play, it's a lot more like temporary works design, road widening, build a multi-lane road off to the side of an existing road, and just showing a really high level, how do we make this job, how are we going to stage and build this job, and demonstrate to a client that we understand how to do it. And I've been playing with your guys' software over the last month, and just seen how ridiculously easy it is, to literally drag and drop different sections of different widths, stick a few machines on, stick your hats on, stick your bollards on, just all these things that are key fundamentals in what we do, but, so quick and fast to learn and get some video outputs, especially with moving cars and all that stuff out. And it definitely finds that that hole between, like you've got software out there that's looking at big, huge 3D models, how this thing's going to look, and then you've got the opposite end of that, where you've kind of got twin motion, which, yeah, it's got moving vehicles and bits and pieces on, but it's got significant limitations as well, you know. So yeah, it's a really cool. Obviously, like you say, Sam, you've tripped on beyond typicals in terms of being part of something else, but that's obviously the real key, the key thing that probably a lot of people in our industry have been chasing for a long, long time, huh?
Yeah, I wish I could claim that I was brilliant and I knew that this was exactly the way it was all going to turn out, but I had no idea. I didn't know that this was going to be what it was going to be. But we just had to kind of like listen to our customers along the way, make some pivots, and this is something that I would have never imagined, because you think about it and you're like, oh, it's just a typical section extended in 3D. But the more you use it and the more you see it, the more you realize how much it can actually, how many scenarios it can actually cover. Like, it can't cover every scenario. Every demo we're on, someone asks, when's Beyond Intersection coming out? And the answer is not yet. Someday we would love to. But still, there are so many scenarios where you're like, oh, wow, I can use this in a way where I would have had to spend a lot of money or a lot of time doing all this custom stuff. And along with that, you know, things like bridges that you're able to do now, and things like photo compositing, it just, every update, it expands more into the types of visualization that you can cover, again, in a way that I would have never anticipated.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's still holding to its core of being software that can be like that street mix on steroids, where it can be very quick and easy to build out a 3D section, but then you also have a ton of extra power and possibilities just within that software, to be able to customize it and fine tune it and make it do things that, you know, it maybe wasn't intended to do. But once you develop that 3D space and you get someone with that creativity to, you know, what if I put my camera position somewhere else and start looking at a roadway that I've built from points of view that we didn't really deliver before. You know, you could build a 3D road and be able to move your camera along the bike lane to see, what does this look like for those people riding in bikes on a street? Like, that's not something we could ever have delivered in, you know, any of my workflows up till now. You know, this is basically like you mentioned, Graeme. There are tools and projects that can support 3D visualization the way we do it now. But there are plenty of other projects, you know, smaller projects, shorter timelines, lower budgets, and having smaller companies, you know, or public sector agencies that might not be able to afford that kind of staff or that kind of software. This is making 3D visualization accessible to all those different types of staff and projects, so that we all can communicate in that way that everybody wants to on those big projects, which is, we want to see this in 3 dimensions. We want to see this photorealistic so that people can understand it, that aren't engineers or planners. And that's the beauty of this tool, is it's bringing 3D visualization into a lot of those people's hands and a lot of those projects that couldn't have afforded it otherwise. So that's one thing we want to always hold to with Beyond Typicals, is this should be easy to learn and quick to use. And anything that we add to that is just kind of icing on the cake for those people that have the time, or, you know, develop expertise with it and can start doing this stuff a lot faster too. But it's a lot of that is built in there and just ready for people to explore.
And with the wouldn't mind just touching quickly on like, obviously integrating with other software is probably one thing I've noticed, that you are very flexible with this. You do a lot of videos on SketchUp and pulling those kind of parts into it, just to really expand, you know, again, like you say, from what is a typical road scene, suddenly it lets you incorporate different fundamentals into what's going on, along with, if you're missing an asset, for example, in your library, you can rattle something out of SketchUp and it suddenly becomes an asset, you know, it's part of your asset library within the software itself to use, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So in terms of like cross compatibility with this tool, this is still first and foremost a visualization tool. So this isn't something that an engineer is going to export something out of Beyond Typicals and put into a corridor model and start designing off of that. This is still first and foremost meant to visually communicate a project. But like Street Mix, it kind of has those building blocks of lanes and sidewalks and trees sections where you can build out that road left to right. But then we also have a library of assets. So we have about 400 3D objects that you can pull into that model. That also includes like cars driving in the lanes, people walking on sidewalks, buildings, vegetation, signs, and things like that. But we understand we're not going to be able to cover the world's infrastructure standards and signs and architecture and things like that. So like you said, we have an import asset tool built into the software, and this is one of those things that I was referring to earlier, where if you have that time to get really specific, you have the affordability to go find or create your own 3D object and bring it into your model, which is great if you have like a custom bench or a very specific light pole. If you want to invest that time to make sure your 3D model looks the way you need it to, you can do that using that import asset tool. And yeah, we've pushed the envelope that way. That tool alone really opens up the possibilities with what you can do with the software, where we're limited to a straight line segment that's projected up to a certain length. So you can't have like turning vehicles and people crossing the intersection, moving traffic at 90 degrees from like a north-south direction. But for most of our customers, they're just pausing traffic and rendering out a static image. So as long as you can place it in that 3D model, really with that import asset tool, the sky's the limit on what you can do with it.
100%. And like I say, for me, I just see I was having a good play with the like the temporary traffic management tools you guys have in there, and even something as simple as like showing the where the live lanes, dead lanes are, having those arrows, different speeds, different colors. It's such a simple thing, but it's so powerful, to be able to just literally show lane movements as you actually progress through a job, work in this lane, complete this lane, traffic stays in this lane, flip traffic, all these kind of things. But it just really it really makes it pop, that kind of thing. And that's something that I've personally, like, I've worked with Twinmotion, I've worked with Blender, I've worked with SketchUp, I've worked with a stack of tools. I've got a million libraries of different ways of trying to create a road scene. And this is really the first one that I've come across though, where I go, everything I've been trying to do is almost sat there on the shelf ready to go, And no, it's a really, really cool concept. Obviously, you're going to give us a bit of a few examples to present, Brian. I'd love to talk about the photo compositing, compositing, especially because that's one tool that is probably something that a lot of people wouldn't be aware of. But again, it takes that flat 2D scene to a whole new level, in terms of snapping it into someone's live aerial footage.
Yeah, and we were just talking about imported assets, but being able to actually capture the scenery around that road. We're dealing with photorealistic representations of a roadway. Let's make sure the whole thing is photorealistic. So being able to import static imagery and just layer it either behind or in front of your model makes it look more realistic. Now you don't need to model the 3D buildings that are on that corridor or get, the vegetation and put it in the background. You can actually just take a static image. I'm sharing my screen here. You can see I'm rotating the camera model, but out there in the background is just a static image of a street. So what that photo compositing tool lets you do as a user is basically rebuild the roadway so that you can line up your camera in the model to where that person took that picture. And we have some tools in here to let you do that. But that's kind of a one-time workflow where I can line that camera up to match that existing corridor. We even have some tools here to help with things like camera angles and positions. left, right, up, down positions like that. But that once you get that, you can save that camera position. So it's a one-time thing per project. And then at any time I can come back and revert back to that saved camera position, which just frees me up to be able to model out like a before and after, or the construction staging, or a set of alternatives. And now I can render out images or videos with that actual photograph blended in with the modeled elements too. So just another one of those features to make things fast and easy, where I can, again, don't have to model those specific buildings in SketchUp or go get photogrammetry and turn them into a 3D object. All I need to do is just line the camera up in my model so that it matches that picture. This feature is the game changer. This is something that wasn't there when I couldn't stop talking about it as the employee at a private consulting firm. This was added, probably 5 or so months after I joined BeyondWare, and this is all I see people doing these days. So it just goes to show that, like, listening to that customer feedback, seeing what they want, this was definitely one of those things that everyone was striving to get to, just from a static image perspective. And back when I was in the engineering industry, it was relying on someone good at Photoshop. I'm the engineer. I'll create my street mix section and hand it to somebody else, and then they're crafting this thing, and it would come back to me, and it would, some of it would be wrong, or the pavement markings wouldn't be quite right. And it would just be really iterative, go back and forth, and we'd have meetings to talk about it. We'd send it off to the client, and then they would want to see changes too. And it was just a very time-consuming effort. So this software is just giving me the tool as the storyteller to then tell the story of what I want to communicate for them.
And we're talking about anything from as simple as, like, obviously this is like looking straight down a road, photo shoot. You've got the same options in terms of drone imagery, so you can look down from top down isometric kind of views. It literally opens everything up. I remember seeing one of the examples of like a highway, and where you've got that front and back imagery, so you're even chopping trees out. So you're really kind of dragging the real scene in with what you guys have put in there. It really does open up that it really takes it to that next level, I suppose. I think, was this a Google image that you've got on the screen there now? That I saw this the other day.
Yep. So this was the Google Street View image. We were just kind of looking to, so Sam does a Compositing with Sam series on YouTube, where he's basically just, about every week finding a unique photograph and then seeing what we can do to kind of recreate a model and do a transportation improvement there, just to create, marketing materials on LinkedIn, get people's eyes to see, oh, that's cool. That we have a project like that. We want to do that. And then, brings us some potential leads. But this was just finding a highway with a side slope. And I just kind of was looking around California and, just looking at Google Earth and finding, okay, that could be it. And just diving down into Street View. And I can even take that image and move it into the foreground so you can see it. That is the Google Street View image. And then we just basically recreated that existing condition and then built out a final highway widening where we're actually, putting an extra lane there and cutting into that hill. And we've got a retaining wall section that shows that matching up too.
And you guys now have started including, you've got like the bridge sections, you've got all sorts of those example layouts. You're not just talking roads now as well. You've really started taking it into structures as well, haven't you?
Yes, we actually have an example project built in here that's pretty well detailed, and this is something I built. We were looking for something with bridges and construction staging to include as an example project in the software to help those users kind of get familiar with what you can do with it. This is pretty detailed. It's got 13 different models, but that walks through, the original bridge all the way to a final full bridge reconstruction. But then using that construction staging, those capabilities, so things like area highlights where you can show the lanes that are going to get demoed soon, or pathway arrows to call attention to lanes that would remain open during construction, temporary barriers and things like that. So this whole project, all of these models, building new bridges from the ground up, this is probably one of the longest workflows I've done for these example projects, but all in all, about 5 or 6 hours of modeling, which when I tell people that, when we do talk to people that are BIM specialists, they're just blown away by how quick that even something this detailed can be put together and modeled and basically be ready for public consumption.
It's very, very cool. That I was having a really good look through some of those example files, and it does really just open your mind up to, it's not just that straight road, that you can suddenly start doing so much more in it. That one there that you've got is another great example. The underground service work. It's something that I never even considered until you start playing with those examples to see, again, showing a serviced installation through a road, how you stage that through a live section of road,
Yeah, and honestly, this project was one that I kind of drew on something I actually designed and worked on in Illinois. Very similar type of roadway, very similar type of improvement, where it was a small downtown. They needed to reconstruct water main. There was some concern from the people that actually worked in that corridor, the business owners who were contributing money and funding for this roadway reconstruction. They were concerned about, how would construction affect their business during the construction season. So while it wasn't exactly this, it was still a scenario where the construction staging is something that we need to talk about in the earlier stages of design and be able to communicate as, specific design engineers, being able to say, this is where things have to go. We have limited space. What are we going to do with that limited space? So in this example project, it's showing construction staging, but also showing options, which is, again, that use case that I always came back to is there's all sorts of options, especially in an urban complete street type of reconfiguration. Very constrained spaces, buildings on both sides of the road that aren't going to go anywhere. And all of a sudden you need to allocate new space that in that roadway that just isn't there, whether it's new bikeways, wider sidewalks, or something like that. Being able to communicate all of those different options, talk about the trade-offs that come with that, and come up with the preferred decision are just excellent use cases for software like this, where, again, I'm trying to communicate this road to business owners or a mayor or a village board, and they're not engineers and they're not planners, but being able to all be on the same page while we talk about, well, in this example project that I've got up here, we've got an option where we're rebuilding a water main or installing a new water main. We only have space for, about 2 lanes of traffic. Do we want to maintain one-way traffic and keep some on-street parking? Or maybe those business owners aren't as worried about, the parking and more concerned with two-way circulation. So just an example of something that you could, need to communicate during preliminary design, even though you're showing construction staging. And this is one of those things that we did during project pursuits. A client would put out an RFP for a roadway reconstruction. When we're trying to win that work, we need to communicate our expertise to that client. This is a really good tool to do that as well, is to say, this is how we see that construction, or what your viable alternatives are, and here's what we think, and that can help win work for a lot of those private sector
100%, mate.
customers.
That's really where, like, for my background, I see the benefit in that tool. And I can think the amount of meetings, even with community residents, that liaison side of things, to have a video file showing how something's physically going to look, outside their house or on their road, again, showing barriers, you're still going to have that parking access, all these kind of things. Just you can say a million things to people, but they don't believe it's very hard for them to believe and see, without seeing it. And being able to have a tool that's a scaled model, it's not an exact snip of a road, but it's got scaled lanes. It's based on certain widths. You're clearly demonstrating what you are going to be doing outside their business, for example. And a picture says 1,000 words at the end of the day. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, and I just pulled up another example, but this is one of those things I was talking about earlier. Was you're in this 3D space. We can now start looking at this roadway from those different users of the roadway's point of view. So I just took this example and stretched it out 1,000 feet, but capturing what it's like to be a certain user of a roadway can help communicate those trade-offs and evaluate what's most ideal for the users of this roadway. It's a really great way to identify deficiencies with the design or find opportunities with those two.
I suppose the next thing we're really intrigued about is, so what's the future look like for you guys? This is you're rolling into version 3. That's the next release, is it?
Yeah, we're on 2.5 right now, and we're working on version 3, hoping to get that out in Q1 or Q2 of 2024. As I mentioned before, we have requests for other things beyond this, like beyond intersections, that we would love to get out someday. But version 3, I'll give a few highlights of what's going to be different. One is dynamic assets. So assets that you can place and customize. For example, I don't know if you guys have them where you're at, but like an arrow board where you can move traffic using arrows, and a custom message sign or a sign that you can change the words on it, like construction ahead, something like that. Customizable bus, customizable train, change the color on assets, more realistic people, including different poses for them. And then the most fundamental thing that's going to be different about version 3 is going to be custom sections. So right now we have over 100 sections that you can drag and drop into the model. But once they're in there, you can't change the depth or the fundamental qualities of that section. But with the custom section creator, you'll be able to either edit the sections that we have, or you'll be able to create new ones from scratch. And that's really important if you have, for example, like a curb that is unique to your geography, then you'll be able to build that and put it in there. And so once we have the custom section creator, then in future versions, hopefully this could even be 3.5 or whatever, we want to start doing things like curvature. So, in roadway design, we talk about horizontal and vertical curvature. And so that's going to be kind of the next evolution of Beyond Typicals. We'll be able to make it where we can start doing curved roads, and then hopefully things like road tapers, first with the geometry and then with the traffic, making road merging. So we have lots of plans to push it. We have a public facing roadmap. If you go to beyondware.com, you can find that. And we want to just keep pushing it forward. But one thing that's been nice about the development is it's been kind of slow and very organic. Like I mentioned, we have so many things on our list, but we frequently talk to our users, and sometimes I'll even do polls on LinkedIn, and we try and use that information to prioritize these, because we want to build the things that people will actually use, not just the things that we think are cool. And the photo compositing is a perfect example of that. There were so many things that would have been easier to get out there, but that's something that so many people consistently wanted, that we just pushed it to the top of the list, made it happen, and got it out there. And now it's probably the most popular feature. So that's kind of our approach to development, is just, listen as much as possible to our customers, be slow and organic and deliberate in our development, and then push these in a way that our customers see that we're committed to making this better and better over the long term.
Probably one thing, Sam, I meant to mention earlier was also the cloud-based release you guys. That came out this year, didn't it? But that's also a bit of a game changer in terms of not needing a 15 GPU set under your desk to be able to get a live running software, you always have got the option to use the cloud-based platform as well now, which opens it up to anyone really. Yeah.
Yeah, Beyond Typicals is built on Unreal Engine, which is a gaming engine. If you have kids that, or maybe anyone listening to this plays Fortnite or Rocket League or Fall Guys, those are all built on Unreal Engine. And so what you're seeing on the screen from Brian, that's essentially a video game. And so you need a good graphics card to run it. And most of our customers have been able to do that. Most like CAD or BIM machines, they'll be able to run it, but there still are limitations. And so to get this out to the most users possible, we knew that making a cloud version was going to be important. And so what I mean by cloud is it's completely browser based. You don't have to download or install anything. And we just released this a few months ago. But basically, if you buy a license, you can do an add-on for a little bit extra. And once you have that, you click on the link and it will load up a virtual version of Beyond Typicals. It's the exact same version. It's 2.5, just like the desktop. It's just running on a virtual graphics card somewhere else. It's a cloud GPU, and you can work in the browser. You can edit your project. You can save it. When you save it, it downloads it. If you created and downloaded a file from the cloud version, you could open it in the desktop. So it's the exact same thing. You're just basically kind of renting a cloud computer from us to use the software. And this is very important for those customers that are looking to expand to more and more users, but they can't go out and buy that many computers. Now they can just buy the cloud version and distribute that to as many users as they need to.
Yeah, very, very cool. Very cool. It really does. Yeah, again, it just opens that up to everyone else. Like I know my laptop here is starting to get a little bit dated, so I was a little bit hesitant to try the desktop version, but I was playing in the cloud-based one, and yeah, no issues whatsoever. I think it's a really good offering to just open it up to that bigger market. So, yeah, very, very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, unless there's anything else, this is such a great software. And, Brian, you mentioned before that it's a visual communication tool. And I really love that description because I'm such a visual person. And so this is so helpful for me. And that's really the gap that Graeme and I are bridging with, especially in Australia, and contractors. We're not this advanced, not yet, but we're getting there. To really show that you can do, something a bit better than just marking up some drawings by hand. And especially in this pre-contract space that we're playing in and making the bids and tenders that we put in a lot more visually appealing. This is such a useful tool. So yeah, we're so grateful that the software exists. And thank you so much to you both for coming onto the podcast and sharing the platform with us. Any last words for our listeners? And I think, I don't know if we mentioned, but I believe there's a free trial of this available for anyone that wants to have a play with the software. So anyone can go have a play and reach out to Sam or Brian if you have any more questions. But thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you. We're so grateful for this opportunity to talk about, our software, what we love to do. I guess just one thing I want to point out, I talked about how we initially had ideas for this software called BeyondCAD that was supposed to do everything, and it didn't work out the way that we'd hoped it would. But I guess gleaning a lesson from that, a bigger picture lesson, it was kind of a failure, but almost most of the things that we built in BeyondCAD, we've slowly been bringing them over to Beyond Typicals. I mean, so many of the things that you see in Beyond Typicals, they first existed in BeyondCAD. And so we're able to utilize that failure, if you'd call it, to make this better. And not only that, but a lot of our early customers, like Brian, were BeyondCAD users that now switch to Beyond Typicals and just love it even more. So the big lesson is like you go through life, you have these big plans, it doesn't work out the way you want, but it doesn't mean that it was a complete waste and it was a complete failure. Like anything that happens, there's almost something that we can gain from it and we can move forward from it. So that's my big motivational speech.
I love that. Sam, I'm going to take this opportunity to say I need to have you back on the podcast to talk a little bit more about your journey, from engineer to entrepreneur, because that's so exciting as well.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Awesome. And with that, there's another episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our LinkedIn page. And Graeme and I are always here if you have any questions. All right. Thanks, everyone.